The morning sun peeked through the curtains as Sergeant Major James Thompson carefully buttoned his dress uniform. At 68 years old, his fingers moved a bit slower than they used to, but the routine was as familiar as breathing. Each medal on his chest told a story of courage, sacrifice, and honor earned during 30 years of service to his country. James lived in a modest house on Maple Street in a small Georgia town where everyone knew everyone. His neighbors often waved to him during his morning walks, and the local kids would stop playing basketball to greet Mr. Thompson as he passed by. Despite the highest military honor hanging around his neck, the Medal of Honor, James never acted like he was better than anyone else. Today was special. The town was holding its annual Veterans Memorial Ceremony, and James had been asked to speak. He looked in the mirror, adjusting his tie one last time. The reflection showed a man with salt and pepper hair, deep smile lines around his eyes, and a posture that still commanded respect despite his age. His wife had passed away 5 years ago, and his children lived in different states, but James never felt alone. The community had become his extended family. Every Sunday, he'd have coffee with other veterans at the local diner, sharing stories and supporting each other through life's challenges. As he prepared to leave, James picked up his Medal of Honor. He remembered that day in Vietnam like it was yesterday, running through enemy fire to save 3 wounded soldiers, carrying them one by one to safety despite being injured himself. The medal felt heavy in his hand, not just from its weight, but from the memories it carried. James stepped outside into the crisp morning air. His old pickup truck sat in the driveway, but he decided to walk to the ceremony. The Veterans Memorial was only a mile away, and he enjoyed greeting people along the way. Walking also gave him time to think about what he would say in his speech. The streets were quiet at this early hour. A few shopkeepers were opening their stores, and the smell of fresh bread wafted from the bakery. James nodded to Mrs. Johnson as she swept the sidewalk in front of her flower shop. "Good morning, Sergeant Major," she called out, looking sharp today. "Thank you, ma'am," James replied with his trademark warm smile. "It's a beautiful morning for honoring our veterans." As he walked, James thought about the younger veterans in town, men and women who had served in Iraq and Afghanistan. He made it his mission to mentor them, helping them adjust to civilian life and find their place in the community. Many called him Pops and sought his advice on everything from job interviews to raising children. The town had changed a lot since James first moved here in the 1980s. New families had arrived, businesses had come and gone, but the respect for veterans remained strong. Every year, the memorial ceremony grew bigger, with more people attending to show their appreciation. James checked his watch, plenty of time before the ceremony. He decided to stop at the gas station for a cup of coffee. It was part of his routine, and the owner always gave veterans a free cup on ceremony day. Little did James know that this simple decision would lead to an encounter that would test his patience and dignity in ways he hadn't experienced in years. As he approached the gas station, James straightened his uniform one more time. The medals clinked softly against each other, a sound that reminded him of all the brothers and sisters in arms he had served with over the years. Some had come home, others hadn't, but all deserved to be remembered with honor and respect. The automatic doors slid open, and James stepped inside, ready for what he thought would be just another ordinary stop on an extraordinary day. The bell above the gas station door jingled as James walked in. The familiar smell of coffee and morning pastries filled the air. Behind the counter stood Maria, the store clerk who had worked there for years. She smiled warmly when she saw James in his uniform. "Good morning, Sergeant Major, the usual?" she asked, already reaching for a coffee cup. "Yes, please, Maria. Black coffee, no sugar," James replied, pulling out his wallet. As Maria poured his coffee, the door opened again. 2 police officers walked in, their heavy boots echoing on the tiled floor. James glanced at them briefly and nodded politely, as he always did when he saw law enforcement. The officers, however, didn't return the greeting. Officer Garrett, the taller of the 2, was known around town for his rough attitude. His partner, Officer Mitchell, was younger and usually followed Garrett's lead. They walked past James without acknowledgement, heading toward the snack aisle. "That's quite a costume you've got there," Officer Garrett said loudly, not looking directly at James but clearly intending for him to hear. James paused, his hand halfway to the coffee cup Maria was offering. He chose to ignore the comment, thinking maybe he had misheard. "Thank you, Maria," James said, taking his coffee. He turned to find a lid when Officer Garrett spoke again. "Hey, I'm talking to you. Where'd you get all those medals?" "The costume shop." Garrett's voice dripped with mockery. James straightened his shoulders and turned to face the officers. Years of military discipline kept his voice calm and respectful. "These medals were earned in service to our country, officer. I'm heading to the Veterans Memorial Ceremony." Officer Mitchell shifted uncomfortably, but Garrett stepped closer to James. "Oh, really? You expect me to believe that? Let me see some ID." Several other customers in the store had stopped what they were doing, sensing the tension. Maria watched nervously from behind the counter, her hand hovering near the phone. James reached into his pocket and produced his military ID card. He held it out to Officer Garrett, who snatched it roughly. The officer examined it with exaggerated skepticism. "This looks fake to me," Garrett said, tossing the ID back at James. It fluttered to the floor. As James bent down to pick up his ID, maintaining his dignity despite the disrespect, Officer Garrett muttered something under his breath. The words were ugly and hateful, based on nothing but the color of James's skin. James stood up slowly, his Medal of Honor now visible as his jacket shifted. Officer Garrett's eyes fixed on it, and his face twisted with contempt. "You really expect anyone to believe you earned that?" Garrett sneered. Before James could respond, Officer Garrett did something that shocked everyone in the store. He leaned forward and spat directly on James's polished shoes. The store went silent. Maria gasped. A young mother quickly covered her child's eyes. An elderly man who had been reading a newspaper dropped it in disbelief. James looked down at his shoes, then back up at Officer Garrett. For a moment, the air was thick with tension. Everyone waited to see how this decorated war hero would respond to such blatant disrespect. But James Thompson had faced far worse in his life. He had survived enemy fire, lost friends in battle, and endured hardships most people couldn't imagine. He wouldn't let this officer's ignorance and hatred break his composure. Slowly, deliberately, James pulled a handkerchief from his pocket. He bent down and wiped his shoe clean, his movements careful and dignified. Then he stood up, looked Officer Garrett directly in the eyes, and said quietly, "I forgive you, son. But I hope one day you'll understand the weight of what you just did." With that, James turned, nodded to Maria, and walked out of the store, his coffee still steaming in his hand. Behind him, the other customers began to murmur, some pulling out their phones. The security cameras in the corners of the store had captured everything. Officer Garrett laughed dismissively, but Officer Mitchell looked increasingly uncomfortable. Neither of them noticed the woman in the back of the store who had recorded the entire incident on her phone, a local news reporter who had stopped in for coffee on her way to cover the veterans ceremony. As James walked out of the gas station, the morning air felt different somehow. Behind him, the store buzzed with shocked whispers. Maria, the store clerk, stood frozen for a moment before her training kicked in. She immediately went to the back office where the security camera monitors were located. Her hands shook slightly as she made sure the incident had been recorded clearly from multiple angles. Meanwhile, in the store, Lisa Chen, a local news reporter, couldn't believe what she had just witnessed. She had stopped for coffee on her way to cover the Veterans Memorial Ceremony, never expecting to stumble upon a story like this. Her journalist instincts took over as she quickly saved the video she had captured on her phone. "Did you see that?" whispered Tom, an elderly customer who often came in for his morning newspaper. "That's Sergeant Major Thompson. He's a Medal of Honor recipient. My son served under him in the Army." The young mother, Rachel, who had covered her child's eyes, was now comforting her confused 5-year-old. "Why did that policeman do that to the nice man, Mummy?" the little boy asked. Rachel struggled to find words to explain something she herself couldn't understand. Liza approached Maria at the counter. "I'm Lisa Chen from Channel 7 News. I recorded what just happened. This is serious. That officer's behavior was completely unacceptable." Maria nodded, still visibly upset. "Sergeant Major Thompson comes in here every week. He's the kindest man you'll ever meet. He helped my nephew get into college with a scholarship. I can't believe Officer Garrett would treat him like that." Outside, James had paused on the sidewalk, taking a deep breath to center himself. A few concerned citizens who had witnessed the incident through the store windows approached him. "Sir, are you okay?" asked a young man who worked at the hardware store next door. "I saw what happened through the window. That was disgraceful." James smiled gently. "I'm fine, son. Thank you for your concern. I've faced worse in my time." Lisa Chen hurried out of the store, catching up with James. "Sergeant Major Thompson, I'm Lisa Chen from Channel 7 News. I witnessed what just happened inside. Would you like to make a statement?" James looked at the reporter for a long moment. He had always believed in taking the high road, in not letting anger or bitterness take root. "Miss Chen, I appreciate your concern, but no comment. Some battles aren't worth fighting." "But sir," Lisa pressed gently, "this kind of behavior from law enforcement shouldn't go unchecked. People need to know." James paused, considering her words. "The truth has a way of coming out, Miss Chen. Right now, I have a ceremony to attend and veterans to honor. That's what's important today." As James continued his walk to the memorial, Lisa made a decision. She quickly called her news director. "Bob, I've got something big. I just witnessed 2 police officers harassing a Medal of Honor recipient. I have it on video, and the store has security footage. This is going to explode." Back in the store, Maria was already on the phone with the gas station owner, explaining what had happened. The owner, a veteran himself, was furious. "Save that security footage, Maria. Make multiple copies. I'm calling the police chief right now." Word spread quickly in the small town. Text messages flew between residents. Social media posts began appearing. The local Facebook community group started lighting up with posts about the incident. Within minutes, dozens of people were sharing their own positive experiences with Sergeant Major Thompson and expressing outrage at the officer's behavior. Tom, the elderly customer, called his son. "You won't believe what just happened to your old commander," he said, his voice shaking with anger. Rachel, the young mother, posted on her social media, "Just witnessed the most disgusting display of disrespect toward a veteran. Sergeant Major Thompson deserved so much better. This needs to be addressed." In the store, Officer Garrett and Officer Mitchell finished their purchases, seemingly unaware of the storm they had just created. As they walked to their patrol car, Mitchell finally spoke up. "Garrett, don't you think that was a bit much?" That guy seemed legitimate. "Mind your own business, rookie," Garrett snapped. "I've been doing this job for 15 years. I know how to handle these people." Neither officer noticed Lisa Chen getting into her news van, already uploading the video to her station's server. The wheels of justice were beginning to turn, and they were turning much faster than anyone could have imagined. James arrived at the Veterans Memorial Park 20 minutes later, his coffee now cold, but his determination unwavering. The morning sun cast long shadows across the rows of white chairs arranged on the freshly cut grass. American flags fluttered in the gentle breeze, and the memorial's granite walls gleamed with the names of local heroes who had served their country. People were already gathering. Veterans in their uniforms, families with children, local officials, and community members all came together to honor those who had served. James saw many familiar faces, his fellow veterans, the mayor, city council members, and Police Chief Williams, who was overseeing security for the event. "There you are, James," called out Mayor Patricia Rodriguez, waving him over. "We've saved you a seat on the stage. Your speech is right after the color guard presentation." James nodded and made his way to the platform, where other distinguished veterans were already seated. As he climbed the steps, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it, focusing instead on the young Marine who offered him a hand up the stairs. "Thank you, son," James said with a smile. "It's an honor, Sergeant Major," the Marine replied, his eyes showing genuine respect. Unknown to James, his phone wasn't the only one buzzing. Police Chief Williams's phone had been vibrating nonstop for the past 10 minutes. The first call had been from the gas station owner, followed by concerned citizens, then the news station. As the chief listened to each message, his face grew increasingly grave. The ceremony began with the posting of colors by the local high school ROTC unit. As the national anthem played, James stood at attention, his hand over his heart. He noticed people in the audience whispering and looking at their phones, but he remained focused on the flag. Lisa Chen and her camera operator had arrived and set up at the back of the crowd. She was coordinating with her station to break the story during the noon news, but something told her the situation might unfold even sooner. When it was time for James to speak, he approached the podium with his prepared notes. Looking out at the crowd, he saw more people staring at their phones, their faces showing shock and anger. He cleared his throat and began. My fellow Americans, we gather here today to honor all who have served. Military service teaches us many things, but perhaps the most important lesson is about dignity and respect. These values don't just apply on the battlefield, they matter in our everyday lives. As James spoke, Chief Williams stepped away from the ceremony to take an urgent call. His assistant had just forwarded him the security footage from the gas station. Within seconds of watching it, the chief's face turned red with anger and embarrassment. Get Officers Garrett and Mitchell back to the station immediately, he barked into his radio. I don't care what they're doing. Now. James continued his speech, unaware of the drama unfolding behind the scenes. We must remember that the uniform we wear represents something bigger than ourselves. It represents the values our nation holds dear: equality, justice, and respect for all people. The irony of his words wasn't lost on the audience, many of whom had now seen the video circulating on social media. Some people were openly crying, moved by James's grace in the face of such disrespect. State Representative Michael Chan, who had served in the military himself, leaned over to the mayor. Have you seen what happened to Sergeant Major Thompson this morning? He whispered urgently. The mayor shook her head, and Representative Chang showed her his phone. Her eyes widened in shock as she watched the video. Meanwhile, James concluded his speech. Let us leave here today not just remembering the past, but committed to building a future where every person is treated with the dignity they deserve. That's what true patriotism looks like. The crowd erupted in applause, many giving him a standing ovation. James returned to his seat, puzzled by the intensity of the response. He had given similar speeches before, but something felt different today. As the ceremony continued, Chief Williams was making calls to the state police commissioner and the district attorney. The local news station had just announced they would be breaking the story in 15 minutes, and the chief knew he needed to act fast to show that his department took such matters seriously. The ceremony was about to conclude when Mayor Rodriguez approached the podium for closing remarks. She looked at James, then at the crowd, knowing that what had started as a day of remembrance was about to become something much more significant. As the final notes of taps echoed across the Memorial Park, Chief Williams's phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from his deputy, security footage confirmed. It's worse than reported. Officers Garrett and Mitchell are on their way back to the station. The chief's jaw tightened. He had served alongside James Thompson years ago and considered him a friend. The thought that his own officers had shown such disrespect made his blood boil. He quickly typed back, "Keep them in my office. Don't let them leave." Meanwhile, Lisa Chen was preparing to go live. Her news director had given her the green light to break the story immediately instead of waiting for the noon broadcast. As the ceremony ended, she positioned herself where she could see both the stage and the dispersing crowd. This is Lisa Chen reporting live from Veterans Memorial Park, where just moments ago, Medal of Honor recipient Sergeant Major James Thompson delivered a powerful speech about respect and dignity. But what many here are just learning is that earlier this morning, Sergeant Major Thompson was the victim of shocking disrespect from local law enforcement. On stage, Mayor Rodriguez was helping elderly veterans down the steps when her assistant rushed over with a tablet. "Mayor, you need to see this. It's already gotten over 10,000 views on social media." The mayor watched the video, her face growing pale. She immediately looked for Chief Williams, who was already heading toward James with purposeful strides. "James," Chief Williams said, his voice tight with controlled anger, "I need to speak with you privately." Now. James, still unaware of the growing storm, followed his old friend to a quiet corner of the park. "What's wrong, Bill? You look like you've seen a ghost." "James, I just watched security footage from the gas station. What Officers Garrett and Mitchell did to you this morning." The chief struggled to find words. "I am so deeply sorry. This is not what our department represents." James' expression remained calm. "Bill, I faced worse. Let's not make this bigger than it needs to be." But it was already bigger. The video had gone viral. Local veterans groups were sharing it. The State Veterans Affairs Office had called the governor. Even national news outlets were picking up the story. Back at the police station, Officers Garrett and Mitchell sat in the chief's office. Garrett still wore his arrogant expression, while Mitchell looked increasingly nervous. "I don't see what the big deal is," Garrett said when confronted with the video. "I was just doing my job. You never know if those medals are real." The deputy shook his head in disbelief. "That's Sergeant Major James Thompson. He received the Medal of Honor from the President. His picture is on the wall at City Hall." For the first time, Garrett's confidence wavered. Mitchell put his head in his hands. At the park, more people approached James, offering support and expressing outrage. A group of young veterans surrounded him protectively, as if guarding one of their own. "Sergeant Major, we've got your back," said a young woman who had served in Afghanistan. "What happened to you is unacceptable." The governor's office called Chief Williams directly. "The governor has seen the video," the aide said. "He wants to speak with Sergeant Major Thompson personally to apologize on behalf of the state." News vans from 3 different stations were now parked at the memorial. Reporters were interviewing witnesses, veterans, and community leaders. The story was spreading faster than anyone could have imagined. Representative Chung approached James. "Sergeant Major, I've just spoken with the state attorney general. They're opening an immediate investigation into this incident." James remained composed through it all. "I appreciate everyone's concern," he said. "But let's remember what today is about, honoring all who served. This incident shouldn't overshadow that." But the damage was done. Social media exploded with hashtags like #JusticeForJames and #RespectToVeterans. The police department's phone lines were jammed with calls from angry citizens. News helicopters circled overhead. At the station, Chief Williams returned to confront his officers. He had just finished watching the full security footage for the 3rd time, each viewing making him angrier than the last. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice cold as ice, "in my 30 years of law enforcement, I have never been more ashamed. You have 5 minutes to explain yourselves before I make the decision that will end your careers." The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the sudden silence. 5 minutes that would change everything. The 5 minutes felt like 5 hours in Chief Williams's office. Officer Garrett shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his earlier arrogance completely gone. Officer Mitchell stared at the floor, unable to meet the chief's eyes. "Well?" Chief Williams demanded. "I'm waiting." Garrett cleared his throat. "Chief, I didn't know who he was. I thought." "You thought what?" The chief interrupted. "That it was acceptable to spit on any citizen. That wearing a uniform gives you the right to disrespect anyone, especially a veteran on his way to a memorial ceremony." Mitchell finally spoke up, his voice shaking. "Chief, I should have stopped him. I knew it was wrong, but I didn't say anything. I'm sorry." "Sorry doesn't begin to cover it," Chief Williams replied. He turned to his computer and pulled up Garrett's personnel file. "Garrett, you've had 3 previous complaints about inappropriate behavior. This is the final straw." Back at the memorial park, Mayor Rodriguez had taken charge of the situation. She gathered James and other city officials for an emergency meeting under a tent set up for the ceremony. "Sergeant Major Thompson," the mayor began, "on behalf of our city, I want to offer my deepest apologies. This behavior does not reflect our community's values." James nodded gracefully. "Mayor, I appreciate your words, but what matters now is how we move forward." Just then, Chief Williams called the mayor's cell phone. She stepped away to take the call, and when she returned, her expression was resolute. "The chief has made his decision," she announced. "Officers Garrett and Mitchell are being suspended immediately, pending a full investigation. The chief is recommending termination." The news spread quickly through the crowd still lingering at the memorial. Veterans embraced each other, some with tears in their eyes. Justice was being served, and it was happening fast. At the police station, Chief Williams faced the 2 officers. "Badges and guns on my desk." Now, his voice left no room for argument. Garrett's hands trembled as he unclipped his badge. The reality of losing his career, his pension, everything he had worked for, finally hit him. "Chief, please. I have a family. I made a mistake." "You made a choice," Chief Williams corrected. "And choices have consequences. That man you disrespected. He saved 3 lives under enemy fire. He's done more for this country than you ever will." As the officers were escorted out, Garrett suddenly stopped. Can I at least apologize to him?" Chief Williams considered this. "That's up to Sergeant Major Thompson, not me." The governor's call came through to James's phone at that moment. The conversation was brief but meaningful. The governor expressed his personal outrage and promised full support for any legal action James might want to pursue. When James hung up, he found Chief Williams approaching with Garrett in tow. The former officer looked broken, nothing like the arrogant man from the gas station. "Sergeant Major," Garrett began, his voice cracking, "I was wrong. Completely wrong. I let my prejudices blind me to who you are and what you represent. I'm truly sorry." James studied the man before him. He could see genuine remorse, but also knew that remorse often comes only after consequences. "Son," James said finally, "I forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. I hope you use this experience to become a better person." The local news stations were now broadcasting live updates. The police department issued an official statement condemning the officers' actions and announcing their immediate suspension. The police union, surprisingly, didn't object, even they recognized the severity of what had happened. By early afternoon, both officers had been officially terminated. The speed of the action sent a clear message: disrespect and discrimination would not be tolerated, especially against those who had served their country. Community leaders began organizing a unity rally to support James and all veterans. Local businesses offered to donate food and supplies. The high school band volunteered to perform. As the sun began to set, James sat on a bench at the memorial, finally able to process the day's events. Chief Williams sat beside him. "You know," James said quietly, "I never wanted it to come to this. But maybe this is what our community needed, a wake-up call about respect and dignity." The chief nodded. "Sometimes it takes an ugly incident to bring about positive change. Those officers' careers are over, but maybe now others will think twice before acting on their prejudices." The day that had started with an act of disrespect was ending with a community united in support of its veterans and committed to ensuring such incidents never happened again. In the weeks that followed, the small Georgia town underwent a remarkable transformation. The incident at the gas station had sparked something bigger than anyone could have imagined, a community-wide conversation about respect, dignity, and what it truly means to honor those who serve. The police department, under Chief Williams's leadership, implemented mandatory diversity and sensitivity training for all officers. But this wasn't just any training program. James Thompson himself volunteered to help design it, bringing in fellow veterans from different backgrounds to share their experiences. "We don't want officers to just check a box," James explained during the first session. "We want them to understand the human stories behind every uniform, every face they encounter." The gas station where it all happened became an unexpected symbol of positive change. The owner, working with local veterans groups, created a wall of honor displaying photos and stories of local veterans. Maria, the clerk who witnessed everything, became the unofficial curator, collecting stories from veterans who visited the store. Sergeant Major Thompson taught us all something that day, Maria would tell customers. He showed us that true strength isn't about fighting back, it's about standing tall with dignity no matter what comes your way. James found himself thrust into a role he never expected, that of a community leader and advocate. Schools invited him to speak about his experiences, not just in war, but in facing discrimination with grace. His message was always the same: respect isn't earned by the medals on your chest, but by how you treat others. The two former officers took different paths. Mitchell, the younger officer, reached out to James several weeks later. He had enrolled in community college, studying social work. "I want to help people, not hurt them," he wrote in a letter to James. "Thank you for showing me what real courage looks like." Garrett's journey was harder. He struggled to find work, his law enforcement career over. But eventually, through a veterans job placement program that James recommended, he found work as a truck driver. The irony wasn't lost on him, a veterans program helping him after what he'd done to a veteran. The national attention brought unexpected benefits to the town. Donations poured in for veteran services. A new scholarship fund was established in James's name for children of veterans. The annual memorial ceremony grew larger, drawing people from neighboring states. 6 months after the incident, the town held a unity celebration. Veterans from all eras marched together, followed by current service members, police officers, firefighters, and citizens. James led the parade, but he insisted on walking alongside other veterans rather than in front. "This isn't about me," he told reporters. "It's about all of us learning to see each other as human beings first." The police department's transformation became a model for other communities. Chief Williams was invited to speak at law enforcement conferences about their response to the incident. "Swift action and zero tolerance for discrimination," he would say. "That's the only way to maintain public trust." A year later, James received an unexpected visitor at his home. Officer, now former officer, Garrett stood at his door, looking nervous but determined. "I came to thank you," Garrett said, "not for forgiving me. I didn't deserve that, but for teaching me something I should have known all along. I've been volunteering at the Veterans Center, trying to make amends." James invited him in for coffee. They talked for hours, about service, about prejudice, about redemption. When Garrett left, both men had tears in their eyes. The story of what happened in that small Georgia town spread far beyond its borders. It became a case study in how to respond to injustice with swift action, community solidarity, and a commitment to change. At the next Memorial Day ceremony, James stood at the podium once again. This time, the crowd included people from all walks of life, united by a shared understanding of respect and dignity. "A year ago, something ugly happened," James began. "But from that ugliness, something beautiful grew. We proved that a community can choose healing over hatred, understanding over division." He paused, looking out at the faces before him, young and old, various backgrounds, all listening intently. "True honor," he concluded, "isn't in the medals we wear, but in how we treat each other. Every single day, we have the choice to make our world a little better, a little kinder. That's the real victory." The applause that followed echoed across the memorial park, a sound of hope and unity that would resonate for generations to come.